Picture this. You're about to learn the secrets of units so classified that some governments won't even admit they exist. Soldiers who can appear from nowhere, eliminate targets with surgical precision, and vanish before anyone knows what happened. But here's the question that'll blow your mind. What if I told you one of these units has a 90% selection failure rate and another once rode horses while calling in precision airstrikes? Today, we're revealing every major Special Forces unit on Earth, their legendary missions, and the shocking secrets they don't want you to know. Stick around, because what you learn about number 7 will change how you see modern warfare forever. Before we begin, smash that like button. The algorithm needs to know people want real military knowledge, not watered-down content. Let's get into it. The SAS. Britain's Special Air Service was born in the North African desert during World War II, and they invented modern special operations as we know them. While conventional armies fought head-on battles, Lieutenant David Sterling had a radical idea. Small teams striking behind enemy lines, sabotaging airfields, ambushing supply convoys, disappearing into the desert before the enemy could respond. Their motto, "Who dares wins," became more than words. It became a philosophy that changed warfare forever. One SAS patrol could destroy dozens of aircraft in a single night raid, causing more damage than an entire bomber squadron. Think about that force multiplication. 4 men doing what would normally take hundreds. After the war, the SAS didn't disappear. They adapted. In the 1950s, they mastered jungle warfare in Malaya, hunting communist guerrillas through dense rainforest. By the 1970s, they became the gold standard for counterterrorism. Then came May 5, 1980, the Iranian Embassy siege in London. Terrorists held 26 hostages. The world watched live on television as black-clad SAS operators rappelled down the building, blasted through windows with explosives, and cleared the building in 17 minutes. 11 hostages rescued, 5 terrorists eliminated, 1 operator slightly injured. That single operation, broadcast globally, changed everything. Suddenly, every nation wanted their own SAS. Australia created SASR. New Zealand formed their SAS. European countries modeled counter-terror teams on the British example. The SAS had essentially written the manual, and everyone else was copying it. Today, the SAS remains one of the most secretive forces on Earth. Officially, their operations are rarely confirmed. Unofficially, they've been everywhere. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Africa. Hunting high-value targets, training allied forces, conducting reconnaissance deep in enemy territory. Their selection course has a roughly 90% failure rate. 9 out of 10 candidates quit or fail. Those who survive become a part of a brotherhood that defines elite warfare. Here's what makes them terrifying. The battlefield is never where the enemy expects them to be. They're already behind you before you know the war has started. Comment below. Could you survive SAS selection? Be honest, because the stats say probably not. U.S. Navy SEALs. These warriors were born in the jungles of Vietnam, and they've been America's maritime special operations force ever since. Created in 1962, their name says everything: sea, air, and land. They can come from anywhere, literally anywhere. In Vietnam, SEALs earned a reputation that terrified the Viet Cong. Small unit raids through rivers and swamps, ambushes in the dead of night, relentless operations in environments where conventional forces couldn't operate. The enemy started calling certain rivers SEAL rivers and refused to patrol them after dark. But SEALs evolved far beyond jungle warfare. They became specialists in every extreme environment imaginable. They can infiltrate from nuclear submarines, parachute from 30,000 feet, or strike directly from the ocean. Arctic operations, desert warfare, jungle insertions, urban combat. If there's a hostile environment, SEALs train for it. Their profile exploded globally after May 2, 2011. Operation Neptune Spear, the mission that killed Osama bin Laden. SEAL Team 6 flew into Pakistan, deep into sovereign territory, assaulted a fortified compound, eliminated the world's most wanted terrorist, and extracted with his body in under 40 minutes. That single raid made them household names, though 99% of their operations remain completely classified. Here's what most people don't know. SEAL training has one of the highest attrition rates in the U.S. military. Basic underwater demolition SEAL training, BUDS, breaks roughly 75 to 80% of candidates. Hell Week alone, 5.5 days of continuous physical activity on maybe 4 hours of total sleep, eliminates more candidates than any other selection phase. What makes SEALs truly feared isn't just their firepower or training. It's adaptability, the ability to assess any situation, any environment, and find a way to accomplish the mission. They're not robots following orders. They're thinking, adapting warriors who solve problems in real time. And they can appear from anywhere. Underwater, from the sky, from the sea. By the time you realize they're there, the mission is already over. U.S. Army Green Berets. If SEALs are the fighters and SAS are the raiders, Green Berets are something completely different. They're teachers of warfare. Officially called U.S. Army Special Forces, they were created in 1952 specifically for unconventional warfare during the Cold War. Their mission isn't just to fight. It's to train, organize, and lead local forces behind enemy lines. Green Berets don't conquer territory themselves. They turn irregular fighters into effective armies that conquer territory for them. They're force multipliers in the truest sense. Vietnam was their proving ground. Green Berets built camps deep in enemy territory, recruited and trained local Montagnard tribesmen, and launched counterinsurgency campaigns that tied down vastly larger enemy forces. While other units focused on body counts, Green Berets focused on building relationships and winning populations. Here's where it gets interesting. Green Berets are required to speak at least one foreign language fluently. They study cultures, politics, local customs. They're not just soldiers, they're warrior diplomats who can blend into foreign environments and build trust with indigenous forces. The most legendary Green Beret operation happened in October 2001, right after 9/11. Small teams parachuted into Afghanistan and linked up with the Northern Alliance, a ragtag coalition of Afghan warlords fighting the Taliban. Here's the crazy part. These Green Berets rode horses across mountain ranges while coordinating precision airstrikes from B-52 bombers flying at 40,000 feet. Cowboys on horseback calling in satellite-guided bombs. It sounds like a movie, but it actually happened. That campaign toppled the Taliban government in 6 weeks using fewer than 300 American special operators. That's unconventional warfare perfected. The entire Soviet Union couldn't conquer Afghanistan with 100,000 troops over a decade. Green Berets helped do it in weeks by fighting smarter, not harder. Their motto, De oppresso liber, to free the oppressed, captures their philosophy. They're warriors who fight by empowering others, creating armies from nothing, turning the enemy's backyard into their battlefield. If you're realizing this goes way deeper than Call of Duty, subscribe right now. Because what happens if channels like ours disappear? Real military knowledge gets replaced by Hollywood fiction and video game myths. We're building a community that demands the actual truth. Join us. Delta Force. If Green Berets are teachers and SEALs are raiders, Delta Force are the hunters. Formed in 1977 by Colonel Charles Beckwith, after studying with the British SAS, Delta was built for one purpose: counterterrorism and hostage rescue missions too sensitive or complex for anyone else. Here's the thing most people don't understand. Delta Force officially doesn't exist. The U.S. government doesn't acknowledge it. There's no public budget line item, no official unit designation. Operators don't wear unit patches. When they deploy, they use cover identities. The unit is a ghost. Their first major operation was Operation Eagle Claw in 1980, the attempted rescue of American hostages in Iran. It failed catastrophically when helicopters crashed in the desert, killing 8 servicemen. But failure taught lessons. Delta analyzed everything that went wrong and rebuilt themselves into one of the world's most capable units. Over the following decades, Delta has been everywhere, doing everything. Black Hawk Down in Somalia in 1993, hunting warlords in Mogadishu streets, capturing Saddam Hussein in Iraq 2003, pulling a disheveled dictator from a spider hole, eliminating high-value terrorist targets across the Middle East and Africa in operations that remain classified decades later. Delta selection is brutal. Candidates come from already elite units, mostly Rangers and Special Forces. The selection course tests endurance, navigation, survival skills, and most importantly, mental toughness under extreme stress. The attrition rate is roughly 90%. And even if you pass selection, you still face 6 months of operator training before joining the unit. What makes Delta different from other special forces is their mission set. They don't train foreign forces like Green Berets. They don't specialize in maritime operations like SEALs. They do one thing: direct action against high-value targets. Raids, ambushes, hostage rescues, targeted killings, fast, violent, surgical. Their presence is rarely confirmed but always felt. Somewhere right now, a Delta team is hunting someone. We'll never know where, who, or why. That's how they operate. Question for you: should units like Delta exist outside normal military chains of command? Is that level of secrecy necessary or dangerous? Drop your thoughts below. Russian Spetsnaz. The word simply means special purpose forces, but over decades it became synonymous with fear. Formed during the Cold War, Spetsnaz were designed for deep penetration missions behind NATO lines during World War III that never came. Sabotage, assassination, destroying communications, eliminating enemy leadership in the opening hours of war. Western intelligence painted them as superhuman, omnipresent, capable of appearing anywhere and killing anyone. Some of that was propaganda, but Spetsnaz were genuinely formidable. Their training emphasized hand-to-hand combat, explosives, parachuting, and survival in extreme conditions. But what really set them apart was their doctrine: shock, fear, and overwhelming violence. Spetsnaz became infamous during the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s, ambushing Mujahideen fighters in mountain passes, using tactics that blurred the line between military operations and terrorism. In the 1990s and 2000s, they fought brutal counterinsurgency campaigns in Chechnya that often disregarded civilian casualties entirely. Modern Spetsnaz have been active in Ukraine since 2014, first in Crimea and now in the ongoing war. They specialize in hybrid warfare: covert action, misinformation, sabotage, and direct combat, all blended together. They operate in unmarked uniforms, deny state affiliation, and conduct operations that governments can plausibly deny. Here's the controversial reality. Unlike Western special forces that emphasize surgical position and minimizing civilian casualties, Spetsnaz doctrine often prioritizes mission success regardless of collateral damage. They're respected for toughness and capability, but criticized for heavy-handed, brutal methods that violate international norms. Spetsnaz represent a fundamentally different philosophy of special operations. Western units try to be scalpels. Spetsnaz are sledgehammers. Both are effective in different contexts, but one operates within rules of war, while the other frequently doesn't. Hold on, because the next unit proved that sometimes the best counterterrorism force isn't military at all. French GIGN. After a wave of terrorist attacks in the 1970s, France realized they needed a specialized counterterrorism force. But instead of creating a military unit, they formed GIGN, Groupe d'Intervention de la Gendarmerie Nationale, under police authority in 1973. This matters because police have different rules of engagement than soldiers. GIGN's specialty is precision intervention with minimal casualties. Their snipers train to hit targets in chaotic, crowded environments without harming hostages. Their operators rehearse hostage rescues hundreds of times until movements become instinctive. Unlike military units that destroy targets, GIGN protects civilians first. Think of them as the Mother Teresas of tactical teams. Their reputation was made in 1994 when they stormed a hijacked Air France flight in Marseille, killing all 4 terrorists and rescuing 170 hostages without a single passenger death. That level of precision under pressure is what separates GIGN from conventional counterterrorism units. What really sets them apart is restraint. GIGN's motto is to save lives without regard for one's own. They aim to resolve crises with minimal casualties, emphasizing negotiation and control alongside force. In over 40 years, they've conducted thousands of operations with remarkably few civilian casualties. Today, GIGN responds to terrorist attacks, armed criminal groups, kidnappings, and high-risk arrests across France and French territories. Where other special forces exist in the shadows of foreign wars, GIGN operates in the spotlight of domestic crises, protecting French citizens at home. They prove that elite military capability doesn't always require military command structure. Sometimes the most effective operators are technically police. Israeli Sayeret Matkal. Israel created this unit in the 1950s, modeling it after Britain's SAS, but adapting it for Israel's unique security environment. Constant threats, hostile neighbors on all sides, asymmetric warfare against terrorist organizations. Sayeret Matkal became Israel's answer to impossible missions. Their defining moment came on July 4, 1976, the Entebbe Raid. After Palestinian and German terrorists hijacked an Air France flight and diverted it to Uganda, holding over 100 mostly Israeli hostages, Sayeret Matkal commandos flew 2,500 miles, stormed the airport terminal, killed all the hijackers and Ugandan soldiers, and rescued 102 of 106 hostages. The entire assault took 90 minutes. It remains one of the most audacious special operations in history. What makes Sayeret Matkal unique is their intelligence-gathering mission. Operators often work undercover, deep in hostile territory, gathering information before striking. Many of Israel's military and political leaders, including multiple prime ministers like Ehud Barak and Benjamin Netanyahu, served in Sayeret Matkal. It's Israel's incubator for strategic leadership. The unit operates in small, highly secretive teams, often acting on intelligence that other nations can't access. Their missions range from preventing terror attacks to eliminating high-value targets across the Middle East. Most operations remain classified for decades. Sayeret Matkal reinforces Israel's strategic doctrine: strike first, strike decisively, never wait for threats to arrive at your doorstep. In a country where survival depends on preemptive action, they're the tip of the spear. German GSG-9. This unit was born from tragedy and shame. During the 1972 Munich Olympics, Palestinian terrorists took Israeli athletes hostage. The German police attempted a rescue at the airport. It failed catastrophically. 11 hostages died. The operation exposed Germany's complete lack of professional counterterrorism capability. In 1973, Germany created GSG-9 as a federal police special unit determined never to repeat Munich's failure. Their first real test came 5 years later. In October 1977, terrorists hijacked Lufthansa Flight 181 and forced it to Mogadishu, Somalia. GSG-9 flew across the world, stormed the aircraft, killed all 4 hijackers, and rescued 102 of 106 hostages. The entire assault took 90 minutes. It remains one of the most audacious special operations in history. What makes GSG-9 unique is their intelligence-gathering mission. Operators often work undercover, deep in hostile territory, gathering information before striking. Many of Israel's military and political leaders, including multiple prime ministers like Ehud Barak and Benjamin Netanyahu, served in Sayeret Matkal. It's Israel's incubator for strategic leadership. The unit operates in small, highly secretive teams, often acting on intelligence that other nations can't access. Their missions range from preventing terror attacks to eliminating high-value targets across the Middle East. Most operations remain classified for decades. Sayeret Matkal reinforces Israel's strategic doctrine: strike first, strike decisively, never wait for threats to arrive at your doorstep. In a country where survival depends on preemptive action, they're the tip of the spear. Now here's where it gets interesting. Major powers aren't the only ones with elite forces. Canada's Joint Task Force 2, JTF-2, was formed in 1993 and remains one of the world's most secretive units. In Afghanistan, JTF-2 earned respect among American and British allies for precision raids and intelligence operations. They're so secretive that even most Canadians don't know they exist. Australia's SARS, Special Air Service Regiment, gained recognition in Vietnam and later in Afghanistan, where small patrols hunted insurgents with deadly efficiency across brutal terrain. They've operated alongside SAS and Delta Force in the hardest combat zones. India maintains two elite forces. The Para-SF specializes in high-altitude warfare and deep penetration missions, operating in Kashmir and along contested borders. Marcos, India's Marine Commandos, handle amphibious operations and counterterrorism, proving their capability in anti-piracy operations in the Indian Ocean. Brazil's BOPE, the Special Police Operations Battalion, is completely unique. Born from urban warfare against heavily armed drug gangs in Rio de Janeiro's favelas, BOPE operates where conventional police cannot. Their training and reputation became worldwide famous through the film Elite Squad, though the reality is even more intense than Hollywood portrayed. Even smaller nations field capable units. Norway's FSK operates in Arctic conditions that would kill most soldiers. Poland's GROM has fought alongside American and British forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. South Korea's UDT SEAL teams maintain constant readiness against North Korean threats. These units prove that special forces aren't just for superpowers. Wherever nations face asymmetric threats, terrorism, insurgency, organized crime, elite soldiers rise to meet them. Each unit reflects its nation's strategic needs and operating environment. Here's the final question. In a world where small teams of elite operators can accomplish what entire armies once struggled to do, what does that mean for future warfare? Are we moving toward a world where conflicts are decided by dozens of highly trained specialists rather than thousands of conventional troops? That's not science fiction. That's already happening. Right now, small special operations teams are conducting missions across the globe that you'll never hear about, shaping outcomes of conflicts that won't make headlines for years. If this deep dive into modern warfare opened your eyes, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Because what happens if nobody explains how modern military power actually works? People stay ignorant while governments operate in the shadows. We're building a community that demands transparency and real knowledge. Be part of it. Next week, we're revealing the most classified military technologies that are reshaping warfare right now. Things that sound like science fiction, but are already operational. You absolutely won't want to miss it. Drop a comment. Which Special Forces unit impressed you most? And which one do you think would win in a head-to-head scenario? Let's debate in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.